friends, my name is Christina and I'm a homeschooling, homesteading mom of 3, and I'm here to bring you our curriculum updates, what we are using this year for the 2022-2023, crazy to say, school year. We are in our 9th week now of school, so all of these things that we are using here are things that we've been using for a little while now, and I'll give you a first impression, a quick glance, but this is not really going to be an in-depth review. It's just kind of what we are currently using and just some highlights on it, I guess. All right, so the bulk of our work comes from My Father's World, Creation to the Greeks. I love My Father's World. We've been using it for a few years now, and it has been a blessing to my family. It's both to myself and my children, and we've all been learning and growing with it. The portions of this curriculum, we don't use everything in there, but the portions that we do use are as follows. We do the Bible portion, the Greek roots. We do the, this year's kind of different. There's like a historical thing. I'll go into that in a second. So there's some history. We do the science, the art and music, and the read aloud. There is also some recommended English and math, as well as their own handwriting lessons and a reading time, and also foreign language. And those we are not using from this curriculum. We use other things. I'll tell you about that in just a second. But from My Father's World, for their Bible portion, we of course are reading the Bible, and then they have a text that goes with it, Journey Through the Bible, which is nice because it gives a little bit of background as well as going in a little bit in depth. There are some maps in there. For example, today we were reading about Joseph. So today we were reading about Joseph, and it talks about the many different uses for a cloak in biblical times, which was a learning opportunity for us all. We really enjoyed it. Also in the Bible portion is a book called Celebrating Biblical Feasts. And this book, it's for in your home or church. It says experience the New Testament significance of Old Testament celebrations, such as the Passover, Seder, and the Sabbath. And my understanding of this portion was so that you would have a better understanding of the biblical feasts, because in the My Father's World curriculum, you are going through the Old Testament this year in Creation to the Greeks. So you go through the Old Testament, and this is supposed to give a better foundation for understanding the Old Testament feasts and celebrations. And while it does do that, it also incorporates a lot of things to draw things back and bring things back around to Jesus, which I can appreciate, but it kind of muddles things up when you're trying to really understand how things were done in the Old Testament. But overall, it's been a really great experience. My son really enjoys that. All right. Also, after the Bible section in the lessons comes the vocabulary, and it is Greek roots, which has been really easy. I really like the introduction from this author, but for example, we've got phobos, or phobos. It says fear. It gives some words like phobia, agoraphobia, claustrophobia, hydrophobia. It gives the definitions, some teaching notes, and extra words. You just do one a week, really simple, but you just build on that throughout the week, focusing on different things such as the definition and using it in a sentence and whatnot. All right, also in the My Father's World curriculum, the portion that we use is the history section. And oh my goodness, so many history books, but so many good ones. Actually, truth be told, this one is a science book, so I will set that aside. It's got history intertwined also, though. All right, I would say that the bulk text would be the Streams of Civilization, and it's recommended that you read it for the younger ones and just summarize it, but for the older ones, you can read it together. This is just very textbook-like. It is not heavy in terms of the amount of reading you do in it. For example, we've been doing this for 9 weeks, and we're like on page 59, so you're not really doing a whole lot of it. But this is from a creationist point of view. There is the Usborne Ancient World text, which is not necessarily from the creationist view, but it has very good information in it, of course. We love Usborne books. Make It Work Ancient Egypt is great. It has a lot of projects in there that look like they could have been constructed by children. It tells them how to make their own things. There are a lot of children in it as models. It is very child-centered. It has many different activities here. They are making a paint box and paints. The way My Father's World uses this text is that they might assign a couple pages of this a week for you to read, and some of the projects are optional because some of the materials are just a little bit more specific. One thing I do love about My Father's World, if you didn't know already, is at the top there are the weekly notes, and it'll tell you exactly what it is that's needed if it's outside like the regular basic lists that they have in the beginning, like a notebook and pen and folders and things like that. So for that paint box, I think that you needed to get some materials that we didn't have on hand, and we kind of skipped that project, but my son just looked carefully at it and thought that was neat. So it says that you would need reeds, strips of balsa wood marked as shown, PVA, glue, powder paints, craft knife. So this could be definitely a really cool project, but it's just not one that we chose to do this time. However, my son did make a reed boat using grass from the yard. Okay, I say my son. My son and I, and by the way, he is in 4th grade, but we did work on this together, for sure. One text in the book that you're not going to find in other curriculum, certainly not secular curriculum, is Dinosaurs of Eden. Take a journey to the very beginning of time when dinosaurs roamed Eden. Did you know that we have a written record of the history of the universe, past, present, and future, from one who sees and knows everything? It talks about how the Bible is the history book of the universe. It helps us to understand dinosaurs, where they lived, what they ate, where we can find their bones and what happened to them. There are a lot of really nice graphics in here to help you understand some things. For example, here is Noah's Ark. So the Bible gives measurements of how big the ark is, and then it has how big the dinosaurs were, so you could see that, they could have been on the ark. It also shows you like how big a person would be next to these dinosaurs and to other animals. So lots of really good images. Also a lot of citations taking you right back to God's Word. Another thing that we've been using it was not necessarily in the curriculum, but they said you may want to read different creation stories as you go. So we found this book at our library. In the beginning, sorry about the glare there. In the beginning, creation stories from around the world. And it has actually a lot of Greek myths in it, as well as creation stories from other cultures, many cultures actually. There are Canadian, Native American, different Asian cultures, lots of different cultures there. For science, they have this pyramids book. As they were learning about pyramids, there were a lot of different projects. Some of the things were as simple as constructing the pyramids and relating that to the volume of a pyramid to the volume of a cube, using things like straws and modeling clay. And then it takes you through timelines, maps. I like it. It's a good one. So anyway, this is a very hands-on book for science. And then we're also doing our science in a co-op fashion, which I am leading, and I have really enjoyed the science book this year. Lots of great experiments. The My Father's World books in the past I felt were not so great as far as science goes, but I feel like this one, it feels more cohesive. The demonstrations and experiments are interesting. I have found that we have had kind of varying success with the experiments. Sometimes we've had to repeat them and change some variables to see what we can do to make it work better, but I really do like the science book, and I'll get that for you. Okay, so our science book was in our bag because, like I said, it's a co-op, and so I just kind of had it ready to go for the car. But this is our Science in the Beginning book by Dr. J. Weil, and I think, like I said, it's pretty great. We have bounced around a little bit in the curriculum from this book to pyramids. When the history lessons were talking about pyramids, we did some of these, but then we bounced back into science in the beginning. Again, this is from a creationist view. There is a nice long list in the beginning about the supplies you need, and some of my materials are sliding out from experiments and demos and things. But this has been a good one. We have been learning about light lately, light and color and the eye and things reflecting, all about light. And if you don't feel like science is your strong suit, I really do think this is a nice book. It tells you just what you need, and there is a nice answer key, and it says helps and hints. And in the back of that, it does have tests. So if you require tests in your state, that is a tool that you might like to use. So I just want to kind of glance. Yes, that completes the My Father's World section. So these are the materials that were all from My Father's World. I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to show you what we're using this year for literature. So for literature, ooh, okay, phew, work. Okay, so for literature this year, we are going with the selections from Ambleside Online. And last year we had been using The Good and the Beautiful, but my son was really looking for a change up, so that's what we are doing, just because if he wanted to do something different, that's fine. So what we are reading is an unabridged version. What we are reading is an unabridged version of Robinson Crusoe, and I will say I was very surprised at the level of difficulty in this book. So I think that the Ambleside Online, I have him on level 4. My son is in 4th grade. And let me just read you a little snippet so you can get an impression of the text. Such impression did this make upon me, that after the storm was over, I laid aside all my works, my building and fortifying, and applied myself to make bags and boxes, to separate the powder, and to keep it only in a little parcel, and hope that whatever might come, it might not take all... See, I messed up. Such impression did this make upon me that after the storm was over, I laid aside all my works, my building and fortifying, and applied myself to make bags and boxes, to separate the powder, and to keep it only a little in a parcel, and hope that whatever might come, it might not all take it fire at once, and to keep it so apart that it should not be possible to make one part fire another. So that is just a little snippet. I just opened up a random page and started reading to you. The book is written in that way, and for my son and I, it was a little bit of a transition into reading something like this, but we are reading it together, and I just have it sectioned out by the weeks, and it really works out just to be about 2 pages a day. So it's not, 4 pages, like you flip it 2 times. So we read 4 pages of this a day so that it is not overwhelming. So Robinson Crusoe is the reading that we're doing together. We also read Tennyson's poems, 1 a day, and I did not buy the Ambleside Online version that they have on Amazon. Instead, I just chose a book from the library. But once we've read through all those poems that were in that particular book, which was, by the way, these books that are in the Ambleside selection were all in the adult section. They were not in the juvenile section. The abridged version of this was in the juvenile section, but I wanted the real text. And the same for the Tennyson poems. Those were in the adult section of the library. But anyway, we had read through all the Tennyson poems in that particular book, and so we switched over to this one, which is a Poetry for Young People book, and I really, really love it. Actually, it's funny because whenever we go to do it, I always give it a funny name. I always say Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I like to bring out the dramatics. It keeps things interesting, right? Anyhow, I found out that one of these poems in here, my grandfather, who I never met, used to recite. So that was kind of a fun connection for our family. And actually, I had never, to my knowledge, I may have been exposed to it at some point, but I don't recall ever reading any of these poems in here, and they've been wonderful. And it's called Poetry for Young People, and it was in the juvenile section of our library. So that kind of deviates a little bit from the Ambleside Online, but we did what we could, and now we've moved on. All right, the other thing that we are doing is Age of Fable. This is a big honkin' book, but we are only reading a small portion of it. Again, I have it marked so that we can do a little bit of it every week, and it really is not very much. So in this Age of Fable portion, we are learning about Greek and Roman myths, and a lot of it was some backstory to those and building the foundation for it, and why, building a case for even why it is important to understand Greek and Roman myths. And then it kind of goes into the actual myths. We're finally into that section. At first my son was like, how long will it be until we actually get to hear some of these stories, Mom? So now that we're there, I'm finding that the selections are quite short as it's talking about the different people in these myths. And so I have been able to find and supplement from our library some other books to kind of just reinforce that story. And some of them are back in this Creation Stories from the World book that I showed you earlier. But I sometimes just find other ones throughout the house. Now, another portion of the Ambleside online curriculum that I was hoping to do is Shakespeare, but to be honest, I'm a little bit intimidated by it, as I saw that a lot of people were over on the Ambleside online community on Facebook. But it is something that I hope to do, and I should probably, now that I'm further along and feeling comfortable about school, I should probably go ahead and try to pick that up again. But we did read a easier version of the Shakespeare play in an Usborne book that we had, which I don't have with me right now, but I'll link it below if you want to see. But we read an easier version of that story, and now I kind of want to dig into the actual Shakespeare literature using his words. And I saw where people had puppets that you could cut out so that you could like have little stick people and have them doing different things, because there are a lot of characters and you could like print out different backdrops and things. So I will give that a go and get back to you, let you know how that's going. All right, other things we are doing. My son really loves history, and that's one of the reasons why I am sticking with My Father's World, because I feel like the history in it is so good, and they always use really great resources. Oh my gosh, the read-alouds. I never talked about the read-alouds from My Father's World. I always love them, and this year it did not disappoint. We are in our second read-aloud from My Father's World called Star of Light, and it's fantastic. I'll show it to you in a bit. But we'll just have to circle back to that. All right, the handwriting we chose this year is cursive, letters, and coloring. It's prescripts, and it's a portion of the classical conversations curriculum, and it will have some practice pages, and then it has a piece from art, or a piece of art from longer ago, and it just kind of goes through time, and the art is always from different cultures and things, and he doesn't always color them very well, but in my mind it's exposure, and I'm not super concerned about the coloring. I think at this point he can color well when he wants to, and we've got a lot of other things going on, so I'm not going to expect perfection on the coloring page. I just want the practice of the cursive letters to be decent, and he can look up. A lot of times the art is something very similar to a famous work of art, and sometimes it's just a picture of a place that you can look up, but we always look something up online to go with it. All right, for his actual art lessons, we are using God in the History of Art by Barry Stebbing, and some of this ties into ancient Egypt. There are some ancient Egypt lessons that he did in the back when we were studying pyramids, but a lot of times there is just a short little lesson and then a practice area. It is not at all hard, but I think the simplicity of it, it expects my son, I think, to be a little bit more concentrated and detailed than what he thinks he ought to be. So a lot of times we will go back and really work on getting his ellipses, for examples. That was hard for him. Like he was just supposed to draw some ellipses, and he couldn't get them very smushed like in the picture. So I actually have to monitor the art a little bit, but that's okay. And this came from My Father's World, so now I'm getting things mixed up. But this was from My Father's World. We're liking it. A timeline piece for today from My Father's World of Joseph. That'll go up. Okay, new to us this year, our first time. Oh, here's my son's copy of Robinson Crusoe. New to us this year, our very first year of doing IEW, the Institute for Excellence in Writing. And I have to say, I regret not starting this sooner. If this is something that you want to try, do it, because I really feel like there are really great exercises that build up to writing strong papers. And I think that had I started this earlier, my children would be much better writers. I know that the Charlotte Mason method might not necessarily have the children do what they're doing at this point, but I really love it so much. So like here, it has a checklist of what is expected in the work. I might do a separate video on IEW just because it was new to me, and there are a lot of things that I really like about it. I really wish that we would have done it sooner. So I guess stay tuned for that, because I think I'm going to do that. But generally speaking, day one is a review day. There's a lot of like teacher-child, parent-child time. It is really hands-on. So as a parent, expect to be very hands-on on day one. Also, the lesson I feel takes longer on day one than it does toward the end of the week. I feel like to the end of the week, it kind of like trickles down to not needing so much time. But day one, we could probably spend 45 minutes or so on writing, which was more than I really had planned for initially, but it's worth it. So we do, because I'm seeing value in it. I feel like he's becoming a much stronger writer. So I want to stick with it. Days 2 and 3, where he's working towards the goals in the writing, there's that checklist that you're going to go through. Those take about, it can take as long as you want it to take for your kid. How perfect do you want their work to be? But I would say probably 20 minutes to a half hour. And then day 4, still another 20 minutes to a half hour. So generally speaking, first day is a little longer. You can see here my son has printed out a couple different drafts. Some people don't require their children to print things, but I like it so that you can see the progress. You can actually write on there things that need fixed. I like it. I'm really happy with it. So this is a keeper. Oh, and we chose, as far as Institute for Excellence in Writing goes, you'll see my son, he really loves history, so I just dug in deep with the writing and then the handwriting and everything. I just got as much history themed things as I could. So we have ancient history based writing lessons, and it's working really well for us. They do have other topics though, if that's something that interests you, and then there are some that's not as thematic as this. All right, and I believe the final thing that I'm going to share with you is our math curriculum, and it is different this year. So for math this year, I have to tell you, math is the curriculum that I've jumped around on the most in my homeschooling journey, and we are now on our, let's see, 1, 2, 3, this I think is our 4th curriculum, but I really like it, and I will go into reasons for switching later, but we went with Singapore Math, primary mathematics. There is a textbook, like we do the textbook stuff together. There is the workbook, which is independent practice for him. I have a composition notebook that he can write work in, or if we are doing something together, it's just where I write instead of doing on a dry erase board or something like that. And then there is also the Home Instructor's Guide. And in the back of the Home Instructor's Guide, there are some mental math activities. However, I decided I really just didn't want to copy it. I think it's a little bit of a pain to scan and copy all this stuff. And I also didn't want to rip it out of my teacher's book. So I kind of took a lazy route, and I went with a 4th grade Fluency workbook from Eureka Math, and so he does some things in there on occasion. Let's see. So this one, for example, was estimation. finding the midpoint. So these are things that are just, they're practice skills that would help, and fluency, that would help with the math this year. All right, so Singapore math, some things that I like about it are there are the tactile things. I have a little binder full of manipulatives that we use. The strategies that are used in Singapore math are very similar to the strategies that we've used in the past, such as tape diagrams. Well, really, that's the big one. I will say there is more of an emphasis on more traditional algorithms, like your standard algorithms, and I like that. And I will say that I think that it's a little bit harder. So this is level 4A, and I think that in some ways it's a little bit more difficult than what I know they are doing in the 4th grade classrooms in public schools in our state. I don't think that's a pro or a con. I'm just saying if you're if you're coming from the public school arena, there's a possibility that you may want to just go down one level on Singapore math, or you may want to see about taking a placement test or something like that. Just be careful when switching curriculums, because the curriculum that we were using before, I know there are some things that I had to do to kind of catch him up before we could actually do the lessons in here, and that's fine. You know, I mean, when you jump around with curriculum, that happens, so that's okay. All right, so these are the things that my 4th grader is using this year for homeschool. I hope that this video was helpful to you. I will be going a little bit more in depth on some of these things, and also why we switched from certain curricula. So if you have any questions for me, please put them down in the comments below, and if you want to see more like this, please also let me know. All right, thank you. Have a blessed day. Bye.